I think if I had to choose my favorite cut, this is very controversial in beef worlds because obviously I feel like my death row meal would be a ribeye, but one of my very favorite steaks that I just keep coming back to is top sirloin and top sirloin cap. I love the texture. I love the meatiness. I just think it's a fantastic steak for people who really love the taste of beef.
Welcome to the Rumination Podcast presented by Jefo Nutrition. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Eckerly. Today we are taking a slightly different take with the podcast, looking at the end of our product line and how our industry is being affected by events such as Meatless Monday and what we're able to do to keep beef on the table. With me today to discuss this topic is the hardcore carnivore herself, Miss Jess Pryles, chef, author, speaker, TV host, and businesswoman who created the brand Hardcore Carnivore, followed by more than 180,000 people on Instagram. Jess is from Australia, but now lives in Austin, Texas. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So just seeing that you're living in Austin, what's it like to live in a city known for copious amounts of barbecue? I live in Dallas, so we see it. And so it's one of those, and there's this big alternative food culture with Austin. They like to keep it weird. So how's it going?
Very much so. I mean, it's literally why I moved here from Australia. It's arguably the barbecue capital. Lockhart might have something to say about that, but it's a very vibrant city and meat everywhere in Texas. Even a sort of weird city like Austin is still very dominant.
That's kind of how I see it, living up north, where we see Lockhart and those bringing those barbecue cultures together, and then just Austin with Franklin's and the great brands that come out of there. I mean, it's beef is definitely the king of Texas barbecue, though, for sure. So, how do you feel about Meatless Monday, and where do we see that affecting the nutrition standards and eating habits of, especially with kids growing up today?
I don't feel much about Meatless Monday. Um, I definitely think, like with anything, if you look back at diet fads over the last few decades, now it's South Beach, and now it's Atkins, and now it's the grapefruit diet, and now it's keto, now it's carnivore. And even carnivore, I think we can agree as carnivores or as
Mhm.
omnivores who eat meat, rather, that a balanced nutrition plan is probably the smartest thing to continue to promote to people. So, as I understand it, and I'm a cook and chef and recently crowned meat scientist, but I don't have all of the data, obviously, on sustainability and things of that nature. But as I understand it, Meatless Monday is making very little impact, particularly to carbon offsetting, compared to things like, all of our wonderful vegan influencers who are traveling all over the world to take all of their great influencer shots, not realizing what the carbon emissions of their airplane trips are doing comparable to a Meatless Monday.
hmm Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, and I think part of it is we see this pushback against our ranching heritage culture that we have even in Australia and here in the States, and what can we be doing as an industry, as individuals, family owned operations to impact our consumer demand, our brand knowledge more positively. I saw Tyson, for example, a couple weeks ago putting out carbon credits for their beef producers and offering that. Is that some way where we can make a positive splash against or in favor of our industry?
I think just telling the story, there's a lot of great social media platforms at the moment. Instagram's obviously big, but particularly for ag, TikTok has been extremely successful. There are a lot of big agriculture producers. I shouldn't say big, I mean big accounts on TikTok, but small independent ranchers, both on the dairy and the beef production side, who have hundreds of thousands of followers of these engaged consumers interested to know from the horse's mouth how the system works. And I think telling those stories directly and honestly is the most powerful tool of all. I've seen some content on there of a guy who showed his Angus herd getting out and immediately into the muck yard. And he said, all of the gates were open. There's the pasture right there. But no, they chose to stay in the barn in their crap because they're cattle. This is just what they do. We're not doing it to them. So, and just little stories like that are extremely powerful to show people the transparency behind ranching and agriculture.
Mhm. Yeah, putting the face to the brand. I see when we go here to our farmers market. I mean, love the local ranchers that bring their product to the market and really get an interface. And I think that has a positive impact across communities as well. So you recently went on vacation back home.
Yes,
Hopefully had a wonderful thing. Noticed that butcher shop you toured. Oh, that thing.
it's pretty
Yeah, I
special,
wish
huh?
it was. Yeah, I was like, why don't we have that here? Right. So, what's one thing about being back home that you miss and would love to bring back or have here in the States more often?
Well, I mean, I should say as well, that butcher shop is really that sort of, top 1% in the world. It looks more like a Louis Vuitton boutique than a butcher shop, and it was sort of more a jaw-dropping experience of wow. But obviously we do have amazing places here in the States that celebrate meat in that way as well. I would bring back meat pies. That's a very classic Australian thing. It's the first thing that I did when I landed and got off the plane. I drove to this little pie shop that's very famous. They're not at all obviously like American pies. They're probably like 4 inches in diameter, puff pastry, and they're filled with like this ground beef and gravy, brown gravy filling. And that's our stadium food. So instead of hot dogs, you'll have a meat pie. And I feel like Americans would absolutely love them. I don't know why they're not more successful over here.
Right. In Texas, we call them empanadas. Uh,
Yes,
no, they're different. I
same,
know they're
same,
different.
but different.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, what's your all-time favorite beef cut, and how do you like it prepared? And then in today's marketplace, what's some advice to keep beef on the plate? And are there any hidden cuts that we're missing out of the grocery store or certain markets that we're not attending?
I think the key is, obviously, the American public is much more educated on their grading system than a lot of other countries in the world. And I think the point is, we do say for certain cuts to just buy the best you can afford for something like a prime rib, for example, and even something like a brisket, which ironically started as, the secondary cut that we were trying to find ways to improve through low and slow cooking and smoking. And now, if you go to these top 50 barbecue joints in Texas, as deemed by Texas Monthly, which is kind of considered the Bible for this thing, nearly all of them are using, at minimum, prime grade because, it just goes to sort of reinforce that idea that quality meat will end up with a quality finished product. So, having said that, I think that there are times that you're best off trying to do that. And there are other times when you can really afford to get a bit more creative. In Texas, tacos, obviously a huge thing as well. I frequently buy select skirt steaks, select tri tips, particularly if I'm going to be cutting them in a carne asada style, where I'll ultimately be dicing them quite fine, or even if you're going to be, like a chuck, you could absolutely do a lower grade too, because you're going to be introducing moisture to it in a braise or a guisada or a stew, something like that. And I think those are the places that you can kind of shop the rainbow of what's available to us. We also have here in Texas a lot of differences in what you can get in the grocery store versus specialty markets. So, for example, in Asian markets, you're more likely to find skin on pork belly, which is very common in Australia, but um, you know, who doesn't love crackling? And conversely, in Mexican markets, you're more likely to find cheeks for barbacoa or lengua, tongue for tacos and things of that nature. So it's also fun to try and shop, I suppose, more ethnic markets and see if you can try something different to what you've previously tried. I think if I had to choose my favorite cut, this is very controversial in beef worlds because obviously I feel like my death row meal would be a ribeye, but one of my very favorite steaks that I just keep coming back to is top sirloin and top sirloin cap. I love the texture, I love the meatiness. I just think it's a fantastic steak for people who really love the taste of beef.
I would agree with that. And like a good Denver or hanger steak, like those are steaks that you see, and I mean they're just so just palatable. I mean, they're fun. They're great to eat. They're good on the grill. They're versatile steaks, and that sirloin, you can't go wrong. I mean, that's the only one that's called sir, right? So
Oh, I'm gonna have to steal that. That's great.
there you go. Not a problem. So I think those are all the questions that we have. We really appreciate you being with us today.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank our audience for being with us today. And don't forget to subscribe to The Rumination on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on our other platforms. Feel free to visit us at jefo.ca for more information. This podcast was brought to you by Jefo Nutrition, precision nutrition for a growing world. Have a great day.